Yay!
G'day everyone. Hello everybody. Thank you very much for tuning in if you're watching today. For those who don't know me, my name is Annie. I am the founder of a network of readers based in Sydney called Read3r'z Re-Vu. Gives me great pleasure to be back with Oz Authors Online. I'm tongue-tied, very sorry about that. And I'm here with two amazing authors that are streaming live with me. I'd like to introduce you to Katya de Becerra and Alicia Jazinska. Hello ladies, welcome.
Hello, hello.
Now, just in case people don't know who you are, which is very unlikely, I'd like to give you a very quick intro. So Alicia Jazinska is the debut author of this fantastic book called The Dark Tide that came out this year. Congratulations, Alicia. Please read it if you haven't read it yet. And of course, we can't forget Katya de Becerra, who is the author of these fantastic books, What the Woods Keep, which came out I think a couple of years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
and
2 years.
Yes, this one that's come out, this baby called Oasis. Please read them, they are awesome. So tonight, what we're going to be doing is we're going to talk about writing and world building in the fantasy world. So creating a clear sense of the world in a fantasy novel is often something that is most challenging for writers, but one thing that readers really take away. So tonight we're going to get a bit of an understanding and some tips and tricks of the craft from these amazing writers. So first of all, I want to thank you for giving up your time to share your expertise with us. But to get the party started, I'd like to get an introduction from you both. So say your name and give us one non-book related fact about yourself before we get down to business.
Oh,
so Alicia,
no.
if I can start with you, please. We're going in alphabetical order.
You tricked us, Annie. I thought we knew the questions in advance.
Yeah. Or non-book related. So like, what's your hobby? Do you have a hobby, Alicia?
I like doing aerial, so aerial hoop and trapeze and that kind of thing. That's what I'm doing when I'm not writing.
Oh, wow. I wish I had that kind of skill. Really don't. Katya, non-book related thing about yourself.
Well, since you gave me a bit of time to think about it, when I was younger, I was a very big fan of Queen, which is like one of my most favorite bands in the world. And
I love them.
Yeah, and that's pretty much like the reason I learned English, because I wanted to understand the lyrics. And this was the very first CD album that I got in my entire life with my own money. And it's The News of the World by Queen.
They are fantastic. I mean, it wasn't the same, but I actually saw Queen and Adam Lambert live earlier in the year at Firefly Australia. It was not a seat inside. Everybody was standing. It was just so packed. It was really cool. Thank you for that. Just so I can add to this as well, one non-book related thing about myself, I'm actually a collector / obsessed collector of Monopoly. I have all the editions except for the original. So
I didn't know
I don't know whether that's actually cool or unhealthy.
Wow, I learned that about you.
Let's get down to business just very quickly before we get into the writing. Let's talk a little bit about your book so our audience members know what you have written. So Katya, if we could start with you, please. Just an elevator pitch about both books that you have behind you there.
That I have very totally accidentally behind me on the bookstand. Yeah. So as you said, 2 years ago, I released my debut, What They Would Skip, which is a genre-bending dark fantasy with elements of horror and science fiction. That was my debut baby, and I love it to bits. And Oasis just came out this year. It's quite different. It's more of thriller, I guess, like a survivor thriller set in the desert, and it starts in Dubai and ends in Melbourne. It's with a very diverse group of kids that come from Melbourne but from different backgrounds. It's very close to my heart as well.
Fantastic, yes, and I loved both books. Thank you so much, Katya. Alicia, tell us a little bit about the book that you've written, please. Do you have it with you? I can hold it up.
I can
I've got it.
Oh, thank you. Good, because it's far away. So The Dark Tide is a dark fairy tale fantasy about a girl who tries to save the boy she likes from a wicked witch, but ends up falling in love with the wicked witch instead.
Fantastic.
And it's beautiful and lyrical, and I loved it.
Yes, it's a great book, and I loved it too. Thank you so much. So just so everyone's aware of what's happening tonight, I have a few questions that I'd like to run past you as a writer myself. I'd love to learn about writing and world building in fantasy, but we did have some fans that submitted some questions as well. And for everyone that's entered a question, they automatically went into a draw to win a fantastic prize, which I will draw at the end of this session. So hang tight. Thank you very much for sending your questions through. We will try our best to get through them. But look, if time lapses, I do apologize in advance if we don't ask all questions. But you were certainly entered into the draw, so thank you. So look, I'd like to ask you both a question. It's probably the most simple, the most cliche question I could ask, but what goes into building a world in a fantasy book? So do you get out pencils and sketch a map so you get a bit of an idea of what you're looking at, or do you dump all the information in a book? How do you get your head around the ideal setting, and what starts you off?
Who wants to go?
Either would like to go first, yeah?
Wait, who's going first?
You.
Either one of you. Oh, okay. You've been nominated, Alicia. You go ahead.
So I usually start with the question like, why does the story have to take place here? Because I really like to ground the setting with the story. So I feel like if I can just pick up my plot and characters and dump them into any kind of setting, it's like not connected enough. So I like to start, why is the story happening here? How is the setting sort of like involved in the inciting incident and that kind of thing.
Fantastic.
I don't draw maps. I'm really
bad. Yeah, I think that was just a thing in my head. I kept thinking, do authors really get out crayons or pencils and try and sketch a map with these maps I see in books? So I was actually wondering about that. Kasha, what gets you started there?
Well, I do sometimes, like actually for my last book, that's kind of the project that's currently, with my agent, is the middle grade fantasy that I've written. And for that one, I had to sketch something. It was like a house that had many layers, many levels to it, and each level was something. So, and I just had to keep track of it because it was becoming like way too complex. And I had to remember what floor was what and what was happening on each floor. So I had to draw a map for that, but it's like not very pretty, just instructional map, I guess, for myself to keep track of. But in terms of how I start, I think it's a similar process to Alicia's, because I don't start with the world, but I like to brainstorm concepts and questions that I want to write about. So, and when I come up with an idea that I'm interested enough to explore deeper, then it starts to evolve from there. So I ask, what kind of world is this? Is this world like ours that's only changed in one aspect or several aspects? Is this a hidden world within another world? Like you start asking these questions and how it serves the story, because you can come up with beautiful, unique worlds, but in the end, it's just going to be like a piece of art. But how does it serve the story, right? That's the question that, in my view, is very important. So you start with the story and then you construct the world around it. That's how I do it.
You don't want the setting just to be like a set piece. You want it to be connected.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's actually a fantastic segue to the next question I wanted to ask you, with how crucial was the world building? Because I understand that when you're reading fantasy, yes, of course, the world is important, but is it more just planting the seed and it's a foundation and then the rest is character driven? How does it work?
Well, to me, it has to be driven by the characters' desires and motivations, and what do they want in the end, and what they plan, what they are prepared to do to get it. Like, I mean, I think Alicia's is different because hers is more of a it's a fantasy world. It's a different world from ours. In my case, I think what they would skip is more closely related to fantasy in a way that there are fantastical elements, but it's set it's a contemporary fantasy, let's call it that, right? That's what we call it these days, where it's a world like ours, but not really. So to me, it always starts with a question or the premise of the story. So in the What Would Skip book, the main character, she wants to uncover what happened in the past, what happened with her mom and how it affects her life today, and what does it mean. So, and this deeper she goes into this question, the deeper she goes into the world, and she like unravels these different layers to the world, and becomes more complex, and then science fiction comes in and dark horror comes in, and it becomes more and more and more and more in the end. And so yeah, that's my process.
Fantastic.
The setting is really important for fantasy. Like, my books are character driven and I prefer reading character driven books, but I also want like that interesting new world. Like, that's why I'm picking up a fantasy novel. to escape this world.
Yes,
Exactly.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it
And
is
so how do you get
important.
that balance? Oh, yes. So how do you get that balance when you're writing? So you're trying to get the character out there, but you're also trying to build that world. How do you get that balance?
I think
Yeah.
by tying the setting to like the character's motivation, like, and
Okay.
into their story, and like how does the setting affect their life, and how has it formed them as a person?
Yeah, it's the same for me because it's really through you see this world through the lens, through the perception of this character, because you have your book written from the perspective of one character, and it's like one direct first person narration, right? So everything is through her lens, and so everything that's happening around her is the way she perceives it, and the way I approach it is like everything has to make sense at the right time of the story. And you wouldn't expect this character that lives in this world to go into like lengthy explanations of political structure or this and that. She gives you just a little bit enough at the right time to kind of keep
Yes.
you moving forward.
Mhm.
So that's like a
Yes.
trick of pacing, I guess, as well. It's just to give you enough information for you to believe that instead of you saying, "What? No, that doesn't make sense." So yeah, just enough information at the right time for the perception of the main character, I guess.
Yeah, fantastic. Yes, so look, as a fantasy reader myself, I've read a lot of fantasy books. In some cases, not your books, I'm just going to put that out there. Sometimes it's overly done with the world building. Like I've read some books, look, it works for some readers. Like some readers love the intricate world building that slowly builds it up and gets you there. In some cases, you lose the attention, which that would be me. So again, it's a balance question. I guess what would be the tip or the trick to try and get that balance between getting the crucial information out there to the reader so they know what we're looking at without actually losing the attention of the reader?
I think
Who would like to go
Katya
first?
said, like you have to feed the information like blah 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 blah. Sorry.
Sorry.
Sprinkle it in, like only have the important details that are important in that scene, and kind of like pace it throughout the book. Like I find readers don't mind info dumping so much if it's like a paragraph here or there, as long as it's not like pages and pages. And also you want to sprinkle in little things so that people are curious, like so there's some mystery, so they want to keep reading more about the world. You don't want to try and introduce everything at once, because I know I do that and it's awful. I think like you can maybe with the first draft, I know with mine, like I tend to just dump everything in there. So I kind of know in my head, and then I'll go in and sort of cut things and then rearrange throughout the story so it's better paced.
Oh.
Just to add to that, because I agree with all of that, and because I do give a lot of feedback, because I'm part of this critique group, and I'm supervising creative writing PhD at the moment, and I find that I keep giving the same advice, kind of in different contexts, and it goes across genres. It's like really like the correct information at the correct time. And you just have to sort of give enough to convince the reader that you know what you're talking about, that this world is legit. So they don't question the internal logic of that world. So because sometimes when I read a query for critique, for example, or the first 5 pages, and if I start like my eyebrows start raising when I start questioning, like, what? I don't what does it mean? Why this and not that? That's not good, because that means your readers will question that, or agent will question that and start doubting that you know what you're talking about, because it lacks internal logic. So you just have to make sure that you just give just enough to keep that world glued together, so it doesn't all fall apart upon closer inspection.
Yeah. Which leads to my next question, plot holes. Now, again, not your books. I'm telling everybody that, not you guys. But I have seen it. Like I have seen, published books that have a lot of hype, and sadly there are plot holes. So I guess for writers, what would be your tip to overcome that? Because the only thing I could think of would be rereading your work over and over again and getting fresh eyes to do that. And that would be exhausting. Is there a quicker way or a more efficient way to do this?
Well, hopefully a good editor or your agent will catch most of them. Here's hoping to that. Look, I think again, like I guess repeating myself, but what I've been reading a lot of space opera lately. I just got into this thing where I really crave that for some reason, and there's books that I really liked. There's you read something and you're like you go along with it and you understand, and then there's like a gap in world building that contradicts something that was just said. Like an example, in this book that I've read, it's a like futuristic society where everything is technology and everything is automated. So they have like even makeup applications through a device where you literally insert your face and it like applies makeup that you have chosen. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. Makeup applied through a device that does it for you. That's amazing. And then in the next scene, the character is describing somebody saying, oh, she lined her brow. She must have lined it with a shaky hand because it's not that applied perfectly. And I was like, what? Wait a minute. So these for some reason, this woman applied makeup with her own hand. Everybody's not doing that. Anyway, so you see, that's kind of a thing that you need to keep track of. So I guess it makes sense to keep a document maybe outside of your main manuscript and like keep track of everything you just made up, because the time will come where you will have to be consistent with what you just said. So, you know.
That's actually a very good tip. Yeah. So like keep a diary or a journal, something in addition to your manuscript. Yeah. Alicia, you do the same?
World building, like facts about your world that you can consult. But just getting other fresh eyes on it, like that can pick up things that you've missed. Because sometimes like your editor and agent also have to read through it many times. So if you just ask a friend to read through, and if anything stands out to them, they might pick up something that you missed.
Yeah, fantastic. Katya.
Just briefly, like currently I'm working on something that's alternate history based on Russian history, and I have to keep a track of everything that I just altered in this history. And I have a document that's literally divided into politics, history before and after this moment, religion, what did I make up, what is real, what is not real, everything, you know, every aspect of society you keep track of, basically.
Yes. So fact checking for the alternate world. I like that.
That's right.
Definitely.
I know.
So again, probably one of the most cliche questions you'd be ever asked, but I'm always curious to ask this question. What would be the most challenging part of world building, I guess, in your own experience? So all authors have different experiences, but what was your most challenging and how did you overcome it? So let's see. Alicia, do you want to take this one? Eeny, meeny, miny, moe.
I'm not good with like the nitty gritty kind of stuff, like geography and like boring facts, like what did they trade? How did they get their food on the island? Like, I just like to write about the magic and that kind of side. So I kind of cheat and I base my settings like off a real place. And then I kind of build on that so that if there is sort of like the boring stuff, that I can kind of look back to that real place and be like, oh, I'll just use that. That's my
That's your secret superpower. I like it. Katya, your experience.
I think in my case, it's sort of like keeping the world complex but not overly complicated. Because if you change in everything, like it's all part of that reality, right, of that world, but not everything needs to be on page. But sometimes you slip, like I slip, and I write something like a metaphor that doesn't make sense in that world, or something, or you make a comment that's like I don't know, like you say, oh, somebody's been a prima donna, but like that comes from, you know, Italian language and culture that means a very specific thing, and it comes from that world, and you know, we took it into English language and that's other languages, but like, would that exist in this world? You know, would they say that? No. You know, or like in Alicia's world, it's like set on the island, right? Would they talk about a metaphor of something that doesn't exist on the island? And I find that with my work, they have to constantly think of mind, like, oh, would they say that? I was like, I'm writing something that's also kind of set in the watery world, and I say, he looked at something like a kid who just wanted to go into the park. It was like, but they don't have parks. You know, you have to. What would be the equivalent of park in this world? So it's just being consistent, and it's difficult. You sleep all the time, even when you don't know it.
Yeah.
I think having a good copy editor for that is like worth its weight in gold. Like,
true.
think with my fashion, that was one of the surprising things I had to fix. Like there was a lot of, it's sort of 1920s influenced with the fashion. And I had a lot of like references to like flappers and things like that. And the copy editor was like, how is it 1920s in this fantasy world? And I'm like, I don't know. How?
Well, you're like a god, you made it so.
Which I think that's actually very interesting you mentioned that. And I think the message I'm getting here is do research. A lot of research. There's a lot of research that comes with it. I myself, writing a middle grade adventure that is inspired by ancient Indonesia. And one of the things I had to look up is, okay, the word kabaya, which is the Indonesian costume, did they have that in 15th century Indonesia? And there's a lot of, research. The littlest things can actually form a plot hole. And it's something that can grow. So the messaging I'm getting is research, which is fantastic. So thank you again for your tips there. Alicia, I wanted to ask you something a little bit more specific with regards to your book, so The Dark Tide. This is obviously a fairy tale retelling, but it's I guess where you get the fairy tale, you turn it on its head, you create your own stories. So I would like to know, first of all, why you chose the particular fairy tale that you did to turn on its head, and how you found the balance in using that as a foundation, but creating your own fantasy world.
So I chose the Ballad of Tamlin just because it's one of my favorites. It was one of the first sort of folktale fairy tales that I'd read where the girl sort of saves the boy. So it always really stood out for me. And it's also a ballad, so it's very short. And I think that helps with the balance because the foundation is there's not a lot of material there. Not a lot of background material about motivations and like background characters and that sort of thing. I feel like it would have been a lot harder if I was retelling something like The Little Mermaid that everyone knows, and like there's a lot more material that you sort of have to kind of fit into. So I had a lot more, I guess, freedom to kind of build on like this little ballad and then sort of make it my own.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Katya, I'd like to ask you a very specific question about your books. So with the books that I've seen here, there's a very strong science archaeological theme to these books. And again, same question like I asked with Alicia, how did you get that balance between drawing the fact, I guess, with the science and archaeology, to then creating your own world so it's not too far-fetched from each other?
Well, I mean, look, I think it's the trick is in the pacing, I guess. And it's a tough one because I'm going to say that I think I've done a good job, but obviously some people will say that this book is, overloaded with archaeological detail or something. But I just wanted to nerd out and just, write everything on the page that goes down there, like in the setting of the dig, because I really find that fascinating. And some people find it very tedious, but I think it's very interesting work. And, both of my books, they have been tribute to something. Like the first book, What They Would Skip, was my love for science and physics and all the science fiction as well that I like. But I find that's the trick with writing genre bending books that combine different genres, is how much of each genre to bring in and in what quantity, I guess. And I think the trick with the book as well, like the further you progress in the narrative, the faster it kind of needs to become, right? Because they go towards resolution. So you can have a bit more of that world building details in the beginning and then kind of space it out towards the middle. But as they go towards the end, you don't want it to slow down. So by then your readers kind of should already get the grasp of this world. So you don't need to give as much, right? So you kind of just let it run its own course and get towards the conclusion. And with Oasis, archaeology kind of is in this book, but maybe in the first half of this book, and then the second half it becomes something completely different, which like it changes genres halfway and it becomes something just very different in the end, which I can't even talk about it because it's all spoilers. But there is a time and place for everything, and then in the end you don't want that to mess with the narrative and with the flow and with the progress of the book, so you kind of just step back and just let the story unfold.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And look, for someone who knows nothing about archaeology, that wasn't info overload. Thank you. That was actually very fascinating for me to read too. So thank you.
You're writing about something you love as well. That kind of comes out on the page. So that's why, it was really fun.
You can feel that passion.
Exactly.
Yes.
Just
Yeah,
my
it's
nerd.
true.
I really
Very
wanted to
true.
be an archaeologist, but this is my only chance to live that life.
Yes, it's like it's that arrow in your quiver, shoot it well, which is very cool. So
right.
I'm curious to know, because I'm often told as a writer, read within the genre that you're writing to get an understanding. For me, particularly writing middle grade, the language, techniques and that sort of thing. But writing fantasy, I feel it can maybe clash with your own imagination and creativity. Tell me I'm wrong, or am I right? Tell me, does it help to read fiction, fantasy fiction, while you're writing your own story?
I like to read. I feel like when I'm not reading, my writing gets worse. I need to be
Oh, okay.
I need to feed my brain's constant words to like keep it going. And I guess it's inspiring, like reading other
Yeah.
fantasy books. I like to see what other people have done and how you can learn from that. Like sometimes
Yeah.
it's depressing because you're like, oh my God, that's so good. Like, how can I ever compare?
Yes,
But
I
other times,
know.
I want to do that too. So yeah, it's
Yes.
kind of motivating.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. The same. Sometimes you read something and it's just so amazing, and it just sometimes just sets me back, and then I'm thinking, I write the books that only I can write. You write the books that only you can write. That book is not for me to write. Like it's something that I can attempt to write that book, but again, it won't be that book. It will be the book that I will write. It's like existential crisis that never ends. But I find lately what I've been doing, I don't read in the genre in which I'm writing.
Okay.
Lately, like for example, right now I said I've gone into this space opera madness. I've been reading so much of that. For some reason, I just cannot stop. I've discovered some authors I've never heard about, but now they're like my autobi authors. Like, oh my God, when is the next book coming? I don't know what's happening with me. I've never read science fiction like this, like pure science, like hard science fiction, and space opera. And I'm reading that, and it's teaching me things that nothing else can teach. Like it's teaching me about very like fast moving plots and clashing agendas, and it's all about like empires clashing, or assassin versus the princess or something. Like it's always like high stakes, and I've been reading this trilogy, and you can learn how the author steps up the stakes, and you can see it's beautifully done, so well done. First is like personal stakes, next is the family stakes, next one is the world stakes. They're like, oh my gosh, she's brilliant, she's done it so well. I almost didn't see it. Like I only see it because I'm looking for it, right? But I think the advice I can give like people is, read whatever you want to read, obviously. And I read a lot of poetry when I'm writing, because I think I read poetry in Russian and English because you can really learn interesting ways to express ideas and beautiful ways to express ideas that you maybe won't find in fiction as much, or maybe you will, but poetry is right there, and you can not steal ideas, but you can learn things and use them in your writing.
So it doesn't clash. It's more inspiring, motivating, helps you expand with what you already have. So it really can't hurt. That's what I'm hearing.
Unless it's a book that is very similar to yours in idea or world, don't read that book.
Don't read that one. Yes. Run the risk of rewriting somebody else's book, I think, when you do that.
To me, the scariest thing is if you accidentally steal somebody else's idea, or it influences the way you perceive in the same topic. Like, just stay far away from that.
Understood. No, noted. Very noted. Thank you so much. One thing I personally struggle with is description. So trying to describe a palace or something that I've seen halfway through my writing book. I do that whole telling, not showing thing. So how could you, I guess, maybe give an idea or advice on how you can show in your world building and fantasy rather than telling the reader? What's your tip there?
I mean, my one tip is, so how does it feel? So what does it feel like? Yeah, what does it feel like to you? Sometimes when I do, because I speak Russian as my first language, right? So sometimes I sit down and I write down kind of words for certain emotions and feelings and metaphors that come up in my mind, like from Russian language or from English language. and what's the different way to describe something, what's the most evocative way to describe something, because writing ideally needs to evoke emotion, right, or something in reader, something. So, and chances are, if it's something evokes emotion in me, hopefully it will translate on page. So I try to find different way of expressing something, and that would be showing things, right? But sometimes you can just get the story moving by telling things occasionally. You don't have to describe every single feeling.
Yeah, well, that's good to know. So feeling and emotive is actually a very good point. Yeah, Alicia, did you have a tip you'd like to share?
I don't have anything against telling sometimes. Like, I like describing things. I can't help it. Usually I have to cut things. I like looking at like describing things through those characters' eyes, through their heads, like make it sort of personal. Like, what are the things like in the setting that stand out to them because of who they are and that sort of thing.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Before we get to some of the questions that our fans have put through for you guys, I would like to know from both of you, what gets you in the mood to write? Personally, for me, I listen to the old West Javanese music, which is called gamelan from my culture, and that really sets me there. It really puts me in ancient Indonesia, surrounded by all the terrain. So I'm curious to know, do you listen to music? Do you have a movie playing in the background? What's your superpower that gets you in the mood?
I like music as well. I make like really long playlists, character-based playlists, like for a certain mood, and that like helps me get in the right headspace.
Do you play ominous music when you're playing a villain?
Sometimes, like if I'm writing a sad scene, I prefer to put on sort of depressing music, and like a battle scene is like, I don't know, video game music, that sort of thing. It kind of, it just clicks in my head.
Love it. Katya, what's your superpower?
It's all about the mood, right? The mood that we create in ourselves, in our books. And I use playlists as well. But when I'm writing, I need it to be silent, or as silent as I can make it. So I don't want any distractions. But I do listen to a lot of kind of the same songs before I get to start writing, or if I need to get into the mood. But lately, to be honest, I've been pretty good just sitting down and writing, I guess. Like I just reread the chapter that I've written before to get into the feel of the story. And then I pick up from that, and you kind of just keep moving from there. And if I'm just working on the same project kind of repeatedly from day to day, it's not that difficult to be in that mood because you kind of live in it. But if it's been a while, like if you come back to the book to revise after months, like if you get your editorial letter and you need to work on it, then I think playlists are very important because you get yourself to remember what it felt like to write it.
Fantastic. That's really
good as well, and that sort of thing. If you need like that visual kind of reminder, like just go through sort of things that remind you of the setting, that helps you get into the world.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So Joanne Sandhu, hi Joanne, thank you for your question. Would like to know, world building that is inspired by myths from around the world. I worry how this sits with own voices. What's your take on that?
Yes, it's a good question. I think obviously right now we're all talking about that line we walk. You don't want to culturally appropriate another world that is not something that you understand. And I think there is a fine line between being inspired by something and just taking advantage of some culture that exists and just taking it and writing it on page. That's why we have to be very careful with fantasy, because you want to make sure you're respectful and you do the right thing, and it's unique world, and you not stealing symbols of another culture or something like that. That's it means something there. And I've been with Slavic fantasy, it's a bit of a slightly different one because it's so popular. A lot of people write that and want to read that. But to me, as an actual Slavic person, like to me it's interesting to see that interest from different writers. But I mean, I would be very curious to know what research have they done, why they want to write this. Is it just because it's so visually interesting, or myths are interesting? What is it that attracts you in that world? I think these are the questions that you as a writer need to ask yourself before you undertake something that's based on other culture, because what is your stake in this world? What do you want to say? Is your position the best position to write this? I mean, I'm not saying that there are right or wrong answers to this, but these are the questions you need to ask yourself, or we all need to ask ourselves.
Yeah, very good.
Am I the right person to be telling this story? And I guess you have to think too, like, are you taking up someone else's spot? Someone maybe less privileged who hasn't had a chance to tell that story? Like,
Yeah. Thank you for that, and thanks for that. Was a very good question. Sorry, I have my phone here with all the questions here. Okay, Claire Amelia, thank you, Claire, for your question. Any tips for walking the line between including enough detail to make the world feel fully realized and info dumping too much detail? We did cover that a little bit earlier.
I think again it's that spacing it out throughout the manuscript and just putting in what's important to the character and to that scene at that moment.
I don't think there is from me much to add to that, but I find like right now when I give feedback to my students, for example, I tell them, do you really need to describe the way this room looks for 2 pages when what you should be asking yourself, like, and we're talking about something that's a thriller that is, like there's been murder and this protagonist is investigating, and I was like, well, this person is thinking about the murder right now. Like, doesn't matter what the room looks like, but then when you have a quiet moment, that's when you describe what the room looks like and what does it tell you about the personality of the characters and all that. So like the right place and time for everything, but pacing. I keep telling this to my students.
So upon entering the room, this is what it looks like. But let's focus on the dead body that's in the room.
That's right. There's a dead body in the room. Your eyes are on it.
Thank you so much for that. Melanie Schubert-Wright, I'm sorry if I said your name wrong. Hi, Melanie. Thank you for your question. What are your tips for the fastest and most effective way to immerse your reader in a new scene?
I think sometimes it's good to start. Sorry, I interrupted somebody. It's good to start with something that really grabs the attention. So it could be a strong emotion or interesting action, or if you start with something like my fingers just curled in anger, and then you go from there. It's like because you're thinking, oh, why is the character angry, or what is it that's going on? What's going through her mind that she's feeling this way? So just grab the reader at first with something intriguing, and then give a little bit of exposition, give a bit of description, and then go back to the topic in hand. So start strong and then let it go a little bit, then tighten again, then loosen again.
Oh yeah, Alicia.
I like to ground, like I think lots of writers have said it, like base it off the senses, like what does the room smell like? Are you hot? Is the character sweaty? Is it cold and dark? And it kind of helps set the mood as well right at the beginning. You don't have to go on for like paragraphs, maybe just a few lines to kind of establish that kind of, the mood.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Jojo's Words. Hi, Jojo's Words. Thank you again for your question. Where do you start when thinking about building new magic systems in your world?
I think, Alicia, you want to go first?
Okay. I kind of, again, I like to connect everything. So with the magic system, I kind of want it to tie in with like the theme of the book. So with the Dark Tide, like one of the major themes is like sacrifice. So with the magic system in the book, like the witches have to trade a little piece of themselves or sacrifice a small piece of themselves in order to cast a spell, like a lock of their hair, a drop of blood, teeth, and that sort of thing. I just like everything to kind of tie back to the main kind of theme.
Fantastic. Yes.
Yeah, I think I agree. It's the same thing, but what is the character? What is the character's motivation? What do they want in this world? And then you kind of go from there. I actually forgot what the question was, but
Do you want to repeat it? I can repeat the question.
I think Alicia answered it. I think I agree with what she said.
What she said.
I was listening so intently that I actually forgot the question.
Setting up magic systems in your world. But thank you.
You're welcome for my answer.
Yeah, no, I think Alicia gave a good answer there. Akio Daydreamer. Hi, Akio Daydreamer. Thank you for your question. What part of the world building process do you find the hardest, and what are your strategies of overcoming that? Yeah. I think we discussed a little bit, but yeah, the most challenging. Yeah.
We touched it a little bit on. I think Alicia mentioned about all the nitty gritty, like the structure of society might be like the politics or whatever. Like I find that is difficult because it all needs to make sense, right, in the context of this society. Why did these people evolve the way, culturally and socially, to have these religions or these attitudes towards life and death or love or whatever? Because everything works in tandem, like everything works together. So I think to me the hardest one, I guess, to repeat myself, is to keep it all together and keep that internal logic in, and keeping lists and notes to yourself helps. Yeah, like as the more complex the world grows, the more you need to keep in check that everything is logical and making sense.
Yes. That notebook, in addition to your manuscript, as I heard earlier today.
That's right. It can go as big as your manuscript, pretty much.
Yes. Thank you. Alexandra Patricia, sorry if I said your name wrong, but thank you for your question. Broadly speaking, why do you think monarchical systems are so enduringly popular in fantasy story worlds? Sorry, small writing here, sorry.
That's all right.
I feel like it sort of has that automatic fairy tale feeling, and that's sort of what draws me to it. It's like, oh, wicked queens and like princes and that sort of thing. It automatically like gives me that feeling, and yeah, that's the appeal for me. It's sort of like traditional, I guess.
Yeah, traditional.
I guess it just has that built-in sort of glamour and beauty to it, because if you have your monarchical society, you can have all your beautiful clothes and whatever, and the world is very different. I guess it's going to be. I guess it gives a certain feel as well when you say that this world is ruled by a queen. People already kind of have some idea of what that would look like, I guess, and then you fill it with details. So it's like an archetype, like something that we have a template for, but we change it.
It's like a foundation, and then
it is
on it. Yeah,
that's right. Because you say it's ruled by a queen rather than democracy or something. It's like, oh, okay, so it has to be a charismatic and strong and powerful ruler, and why is she the queen? How does she stay in power? So it gives you a certain idea of what it is. And I think it's interesting because it's so different, I guess, from the most current societies, I guess. So we kind of like to fantasize about a different world.
Yeah, true. Thank you. Martine Rose. Hi, Martine. Thank you for your question. What are your tips for staying motivated while you're writing? She truly loves writing, but it can also be lonely and sometimes scary. So she'd like to know how to stay motivated during harder times.
I find that, to me, to stay motivated, I really need to be into the idea that I'm writing about. So if it's something that's interesting for me to explore, I will wake up in the morning and that's all I will think about, because I really want to get into that world. I think the way I work these days is I will write a chapter or a couple of chapters, and then I sit down and I think, what would be the next logical continuation of the story? Because I'm a bit of a hybrid between planner, outliner, and pantser or whatever. So I do like to plan a little bit, but I also like to see where my imagination will take me. So I will leave myself a little list, like to-do list of items, what I should write about next. So then the next day, when I sit in front of my screen, it's not a blank page, it's a list of things that I need to write about. I might change it all. I may not follow that list, but at least I have some plan. So, and also I find what works for me lately is kind of to stop working before you completely exhaust yourself during the day. Because if you squeeze all the creative juice out of you in one sitting, next day you wake up, you're just gonna, I know I will feel hollow and empty, and then it's gonna be a few days before I feel good again. So you don't want to like squeeze all the creative juice out. So just finish writing while you're still on the high. Leave yourself a list, go to sleep, dream about your story, wake up and feel refreshed and excited about it again. That's my advice.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yes, Alicia.
Yeah, everything Katya said, but also like I like having a friend or an accountability buddy. So
Oh
I
yeah.
have this friend who'll like regularly message me like, oh hey, how's it going? Can you send me a chunk of the story? Or oh, it's just saying like I'm excited to read, I can't wait for it. Like just knowing someone else is looking forward to reading like the story that I'm working on and that someone else is excited for it, that kind of keeps me motivated as well.
Oh, that's
That's a good
fantastic.
idea.
Personally, deadlines, but that's not a healthy way to stay motivated, people. Don't listen to me.
Oh,
Don't
that's
rely
never
on the
worked for me.
deadlines.
That
I
never
work
worked for
under a
me.
gun. Siobhan Plaza. Hi, Siobhan. Thank you for your question. Siobhan's asked, what's the strangest or most unexpected world building issue you've had to overcome, like deciding whether days of the week have different names or what unit of measure to use? Very good question.
I think I mentioned mine before, like the theme. Like, you can't just randomly have 1920s fashion in here and have it not be the 1920s.
Yes, which is when I was talking about researching Indonesian costuming in 15th century Indonesia. Yes, yes. Katya, what's your most strangest one?
I've been thinking about this question, and I don't know if I have a coherent answer, but I guess the biggest issue that I've had was maybe with Oasis in the second half of the book, where basically, without giving away too many spoilers, it's like the question that I was asking myself: what would a different kind of sentience, a different kind of intelligence think about concepts that we know, like concepts like love or understanding, or what would that intelligence want? And I struggle so much with that. It's because as writers we're supposed to imagine different worlds, but and we have books about aliens and alien civilization, but I just really hit a, like a dead end there or something. I think I answered that question in that book, but maybe not. I'm not sure. I really tried.
Fair enough. Anna Waitsley has sent a couple of questions. Hi, Anna. Thank you for your questions. The first one is, what real-world rules would you never break in your built world, like gravity or forward moving time? So that's her first question, and then I'll ask the second one.
That's a very interesting question. What rules would I never break? I don't think there are rules that are not breakable. I think you can break any rules as long as it makes sense in this world. Like, I remember being at this conference a long time ago for my academic job, and they tried to bring in this creative thinker guy, and he was like giving us these interesting exercises, and one of them was imagine a world in which gravity changes 90 degrees at midnight or something like that. It was like everything shifts, what would that world look like? What would people behave like? What would that mean? Like what would it mean to us? And that was an interesting one. And we drew pictures and what would that look like? That's a world where like a fundamental rule breaks itself at midnight, right? I don't know where I'm going with this, but I really don't think there are any rules that you can break. Like if you write a story in which gravity shifts 90 degrees at midnight, so be it. Just as long as it makes sense and serves the story.
Yeah, rules are meant to be broken, right?
That's right.
Alicia, your take?
No, I'm exactly the same. Like I tried to think of a rule that I would never break, but then I just couldn't come up with anything. It's like I don't want to like put limits on it, I guess.
Yeah. I think you broke that rule with the 1920s fashion thing. I think you're onto something there. We've got time for Anna's second question and one more question after that. So Anna also wanted to know, how did you decide on your main character names and the titles of your novels?
Who's good? I can say about the titles of the novels, maybe not to take up too much time, but What They Would Skip, from the very beginning, I had that title, but I didn't have the book or the story, but I had the title in my mind. It just came to me. So I wrote this short story a long time ago. It was one of my first publications. And in the story, it was something happened to the mom, and she leaves behind her kids, and kids wonder what happened to the mom. So it gave inspiration to What They Would Skip story. But in that story, the house was next to the woods. So it's like, what they would skip. I forgot from what it's called. What they would skip. I think at some stage I queried that book, and I was like should I change the title to attract agents' attention or something? Because that's why I wasn't getting any requests, of course, because of the title. I'm just joking because the query wasn't very good or something. So I changed it to What the Woods Been Keeping While I Played Normal, which was like, what? What is that? What does it even mean? And my agent at the time, who actually liked the book and read the query and read the book, and she's like, that is a terrible title. What were you thinking? Like, there is, that there is like a grammatical mistakes in it. She's like, why you're missing a verb? Like, would being keeping while I played normal. It was like, I'm sorry, I will please forgive me. I will take this back. The original title was What the Woods Keep. She's like, yeah, that's a good title.
So second guess yourself.
Well, that's a good title, perfect title. Why did you change that? I was like, I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. but Oasis, Oasis, I just always felt like I really want these one-word titles. I think that they're very ambitious, I guess, because if you don't pull off a one-word title, then you don't pull it off. Like, you don't deserve to have it, So I was like, you know what? It's going to be called Oasis. At some stage, I flipped and I said it's going to be called After Oasis. But then my editor was like, no, Oasis, it's going on the cover. It doesn't need to be after or before or during.
Well, it's caption easy to remember too.
But yeah. So, but with character names, oh my gosh, I have no idea where they come from. I like gender flipping names, so I like the names that can be gender neutral. I guess I have a tendency to that. That's why I have Hayden, Shannon, Aleph. They both can be different gender names. I guess I have that, but I don't have any logical explanation of why specific names were chosen.
Fair enough. Alicia, your title and your character's names.
I am also really bad with titles. Like, the Dark Tide is called The Dark Tide because the tide in the book is called The Dark Tide.
Makes sense.
Makes sense. At least there's no plot hole there.
I rely on my agent and my editor to come up with like an okay title because I'm just really bad. And for names, like, I love baby name websites. I'm always like on there just scrolling through. It's basically just names I really like. And also I did want to include one name that's sort of tied back to the folktale it was based on. So Tamlin, Thomas Lynn, there is like one or two sort of references.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, that was fun. Thanks for the question and the answers. That was a lot of fun. Last but not least, Belinda M. Grant. Belinda, thank you very much for your question. What's some aspect of world building that when you hear of a book that has that one thing, you just have to have that book? Oh, that's a good one. See, I hear, inspired by cultural tales or like inspired by cultural legends. That's my trigger. Like, as soon as I know it's inspired by a particular legend or culture, it's mine. Yeah. Katya.
I think it's okay. I was thinking about that question, and I really struggle because I am more interested in character dynamics than in a specific world. Like, to me, the world can be anything, really. But if it says something about I don't know, like enemies to lovers, things like, not necessarily that one, but if it says some specific dynamic that I like about, like, terrible secret is discovered. I don't know, like, I'm digging really deep here, but I'm a big sucker for my family is not what they say they are, kind of like a family secret. If I see anything about that, or like intergenerational secrets or something that's hereditary in the sense that it transfers from generation to generation, I like that kind of stuff. Anything about returning to your hometown and inheriting your estate will definitely get me looking. Definitely.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, haunted manor in any setting will get me looking.
Wow.
Yeah, I love
Yeah, I
horror.
wonder what ASIO must think if we're doing research on all these fancy haunted places. I wonder what they're thinking. No, guys, it's for writing. We're not plotting anything.
Oh my god, yeah, let's not talk about internet history. And then you get feeded strange ads on Instagram or Facebook. I was like, I'm not interested in that, Facebook. Why do you do
Yes.
that?
Why do I have this? I know. Alicia, yes, what's your trigger to buy a book there?
I like small contained settings, like island settings, or like a town that you can't leave, or something that's trapped like in a time loop, or like
I
a
love that.
cursed setting, something that's hard to leave, and then like sort of everyone in there knows each other, and like
Yeah.
I love that kind of
Mm,
story.
Oh,
I
I've
love
got a
that.
few recommendations for you. Thank you. Okay, so before we wrap up, I would just like to say, first of all, thank you to you both for taking the time to sharing your craft and your advice to all of us watching on YouTube. So thank you so much for talking to me and to the audience. And as promised, we did have a competition running with thanks to Oz Australia. Sorry, I can't talk. Oz Authors Online. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm sorry,
You-
guys. It's a
You're
long
doing
day.
great.
I'm going traditional here. So everybody that put in a question for tonight, I've actually put it in this cup. So all the questions, all the names are in here. I'm going to draw out one. While I'm doing that, can you tell us what the prize is?
I can give away a book that I will sign. I think a winner can choose if they want what they would skip or Oasis. Like if they have one of the books, I can give them another. Whatever they prefer, I'll give them one book.
Oh, okay, yeah. No worries.
Well, I
There's
only
signed
have one
copies,
book,
guys.
so a signed copy of the Dark
Signed
Tide.
copies from our fantastic writers here, guys. Okay, fantastic. All right,
I'm,
drawing our winner as we speak. Drum roll,
I'm just
please.
yay!
All right, we have Alexandra Patricios. I don't know if you can see
Yay!
it. Yeah. So,
I can't, but yay!
Alexandra Patricios, thank you very much for your question and congratulations on winning. I'm pretty sure we might put something on Instagram so you know how to claim your prize. I guess that's what we're doing.
If the winner wants to DM me or email me through any means, Twitter, Instagram, or email, just their address and how they want me
Yep.
to personalize book, and they can tell me which book they want. So
Yep.
easy.
Sounds good. I'll help you guys out. I'll try and find Alexandra Patricios on Instagram still because the question came from Instagram, and I'll tag them to announce the winner as well to help them link you guys up.
Awesome. And I wanted to say thank you very much, Annie, for volunteering to moderate the session. I was so excited when you reached out. I was like, yes, 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 of course I want Annie to do this. And I was just so selfish because I wanted to do event with Alicia, but of course because of COVID,
Oh
can't
no.
go
I'm
anywhere.
glad that we did. I'm glad that
I'm
we
so
did
happy
this.
that we
Yeah.
did this, and I'm so grateful to the authors.
See, it's not easy.
I'm so I'm so grateful to you, the God behind the
080.
scenes.
Yes. Thank you to our IT support tonight for making this happen as well. Wade here and Anna Waitley, thank you so much. And Alicia and Katya, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who watched.
That's right, and everybody who asked the question as well. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so
Hope
much.
that was
Yeah.
interesting.
Bye.
No,
No,
we
we can
can't
hear
hear you.
you. We can hear the voice. This is Big Brother.
You're doing great.
Yes.
Annie, you're still Anna, you're still streaming. You have to hit in stream. Oh, sorry.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
They stopped it up again.